Good morning. Welcome to the CSLDallas Science of Mind class. I'm Dr. Petra Weldis, and happy Mother's Day to all the moms in the room and to all of you online. Happy Mother's Day. Even if you're not watching us from the US, today is the day we celebrate moms. Of course, we should celebrate them every day, but we set a beautiful day aside to celebrate our moms. And so happy Mother's Day to everyone who is a mom, an aunt, is a mother figure, has that kind of relationship with their children or grandchildren or nieces or nephews or neighbors. There are so many ways in which men and women provide that space. So it's not just for females, it's for anybody who is in that position in somebody's life, because our moms matter. All the people who love us that way, right? Our moms matter. So we are working with our relationship to the spiritual universe. We're in that section of the Science of Mind, and we are starting a section I just love the title of. The title is "The World Has Learned All It Should Through Suffering." And so the Science of Mind and Spirit makes a tremendous claim when it states that the individual should be free from the bondage of sickness, poverty, and unhappiness. In many ways, Science of Mind is the liberation theology of New Thought. We believe that people should be liberated from the bondage of the traumas of their childhood, of the traumas of their family, of the traumas of the culture, the predominant culture, and that we should be able to find our way toward freedom. Now, this doesn't mean license. It doesn't mean we can do whatever we want, although truthfully we can. It reminds us that whatever we do, decide or think, it is the infinite law of cause and effect that then allows us to experience the consequences of our actions and choices, or the benefits of our actions and choices. But there's no judgment around it. It's just the natural outpicturing, the cause and effect of how we are thinking and choosing and behaving. Of course, we're doing that within the context of the human culture in which we are living. And so the Science of Mind is forever working to help us to become free. Free of limitation, free of the sense of limitation. We might be limited in our physicality. We might be limited in the way that a culture sees us. And yet there is a way of finding, moving through that, because we know who we are. Essential beings of infinite presence, infinite possibility. That we are, in fact, individualized expressions of that one life that is seeking forever to express itself. And it does so through each one of us. So we're constantly finding ways in which we can express and experience our unlimited nature. So I'm going to say a boatload of things that might fly in the face of things that you have come to think, especially if you have if you've spent quite a bit of time in alternative spiritualities. And so just inviting us all to consider and to think about it. I had a lovely mentor minister many moons ago, Reverend Virginia Seville. And Reverend Virginia Seville would say, you know, truthfully, we can learn as much by being healthy, wealthy, and wise as we can by being sick, poor, and unhappy. And so the Science of Mind does not teach that we are here to learn lessons. It does not teach that. We do not teach that you have a soul contract, that you came here to work out the past, previous lives, whatever it is, that you decided to come here to learn lessons. The Science of Mind does not teach that. The Science of Mind teaches that you are free to express the fullness of who you have come here to be. And you will learn lessons along the way. And it is up to you whether it's up to each one of us, whether we want to take the inevitable pain, challenges, changes, ups and downs of our life the families that our parents created, all of that, whether we are going to invite good to come from it, whether we are going to choose to learn lessons from it. But Science of Mind does not teach that you are here to learn lessons, because that tends to have this effect that we fall perilously close to the idea that our suffering or our pain is God ordained. Well, Spirit brought me to this so that I could learn something, which is right up there. It's just another way of saying it was God's will. And if we have true freedom, if the Science of Mind is a liberation theology, if we are constantly being invited to express our freedom, this can't possibly be true. It's really a valuable thing to remember that we can, instead of saying, I'm here to learn lessons, we can in fact recognize and affirm, I'm here to take good out of any seemingly bad, horrible, painful experience that I've had, right? Because we can decide that good must come of it, which sometimes is a learning, a revelation that we have a false belief, a revelation that we are not limited, a revelation that we can choose again, a revelation that we could choose something entirely different. We can leave a relationship, a job, a home, we can leave a country, we can make all kinds of choices. And when we are able to say, regardless of what just happened, it is what it is, right? That's the acceptance piece. It is what it is. It was what it was. Now, what do I choose? And so the same thing with the ongoing playing out of our traumatic childhood, right? The experience that we had is real. It's true. We've made all kinds of beliefs out of it. It's playing out in our lives. And we can't go back and change what happened in our childhood, whatever the trauma is or was, but we can choose to make good out of it, to decide that we don't have to live out of those old choices. We don't have to continue to believe the things that we decided to believe as children. We can decide to shift the way in which we see people and family members, and there's so much good that can come out of when we decide we're no longer going to suffer because of it. So we've learned all that we can through suffering. And so the Science of Mind does, however, certainly set forth the conditions under which freedom operates and the laws governing life, stating in no uncertain terms that unless one understands these conditions and obeys these laws, we will not receive the full benefit of its teachings. And the obeying of the law is, again, we want to remind ourselves from yesterday, this is not a human law. This is nothing to do with the legal legal system in any country. This has to do primarily, fundamentally, with the law of cause and effect. The natural laws of cause and effect that have been laid down in every spiritual tradition. Every mystic has talked about it. As we believe, so it is done unto us. And our ability to shift our belief, to believe that we live in a safe universe, or that good can come of horrible situations, or that there are ways in which to see things differently, be differently, do differently, right? And expect then the law to support us, because we have shifted the way in which we're thinking about it. And so this, there's also that wonderful saying, and I want to say it's from Wayne Dyer, but who knows? Pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Pain is inevitable, suffering is optional, right? So we might want to find the difference between those two, right? Pain is the very real experience when we've been hurt, we've hurt ourselves, an injustice has happened, a loss has happened, something significant, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual, whether it's relationship or job-oriented, or just in the milieu of our life. Pain is real, and it's unbelievably inappropriate for us to say to people, well, somehow you created that, or there's something wrong with you, or why are you talking about your pain? Because we do. We have to process it. We have to find people that we care that care about us, that we can work with it, right? We need people, our spiritual coaches and practitioners that we can do our spiritual mind treatment with. Find some good in it. Start seeing how we can move through it, right? It happens. Okay, shit happens, right? Doesn't it? It just does, right? Okay, so we've said it. There you go. The question is then, what do we do with it, right? Suffering is when we can't move through it. And we can't move through it when we hold on to the story about it, right? So I have a rule for myself when something happens that really, really, really makes me mad, or that I'm really, really, really sad about. I'm allowed to talk about it 3 times. Usually that means I talk about it to a prayer partner, I talk about it to a best friend, and then inevitably there's a place in some small group of people where I get to just kind of blast. The 4th time, it's become a story. Now a story I'm telling. And I either am seeking sympathy, or I want somebody to get in on how outraged I am, how right I am, how awful it is, right? I'm no longer processing my own experience of it. Now I'm seeking allies, I'm seeking people who will go, there, you've been so wronged, or oh, isn't that just a horrible thing, right? Because we want that, right? And so, but at that point, if I keep telling that story, and I tell that story now weeks and months and years and years, that all I'm doing is creating suffering for myself, because I'm, it's like, is it still bruised? Is it still bruised? Is it still bruised? It's, yep, still bruised. And I can keep that bruise alive for a really long time. And so obviously, there are things that are much larger that do take more than 3 conversations, serious loss and divorce and death. And, so don't take it like as gospel, or that I don't understand that life can be very painful. But there is so much about the way we hold the experience that begins to then shift it into suffering. And we can actually use the same laws that we teach for manifestation, that we teach that allow us to experience the presence of the divine. We can use these very same laws and principles to help us move through, and to then, in fact, learn something. In fact, become responsible or take charge of our lives and say, I'm not going to let this run me. I'm not going to let this run me. I am, in fact, going to see myself differently, be differently, or work differently, tell a different spiritual truth instead of continually telling the human experience. Right? There's so many different ways that we can take it up that allow us to deeply acknowledge the pain, feel the feelings of it, but not turn it into ongoing suffering. And this is, in physicality as well, physical, reality too. It's not just in emotional or mental experiences, but we get to do the same thing. How do we hold it, and how do we live with it? There is huge amounts of documentation that the single thing that unites all people who go into remission with cancer is their positive attitude and their expectation that good will come of it. Now, they don't all survive, but that's the one thread that so many studies have found, and it corroborates exactly what we're talking about. Surely there can be no intelligence in the universe that wishes us to be sick, suffer, pain, be unhappy, and end in oblivion. Surely if God or universal intelligence is imbued with goodness, then it could not ordain that we should ultimately be other than a perfect expression of life, although unique in every way, right? Our own unique expression of life. So let's talk about all this fabulousness, these thoughts. What thoughts do you have about it? What do you struggle with about this? Or when has this kind of an idea really furthered your life and helped you? So this is an opportunity for sharing. Something that you say may really help someone else. Or if it's something that you struggle with or uncertain how to shift something that you're working on specifically yourself, personally, yeah, let's have a conversation. So we're going to say good morning to Ryan and see what's going on out there.
Well, a lot's going on out there and a lot's going on up here in my head after this part of the book. And hello to everybody online and in person in campus. We're so grateful that you're in community with us today. And as Dr. Petra was mentioning, this is an engaging conversation and we want to hear your feedback, both from the people here in the room and from everybody all around the globe who's paying attention to us on Zoom and Facebook Live. And there's a couple ways to do that. The folks that I'm waving to right now, you will be on camera today, so just heads up. If you would not like to be on camera, you can move over here to my left and join over there.
Come on.
And for the folks that are here in the room, if you want to just go ahead and raise your hand, and Richard, the iconic Richard, my apologies, will help you with the microphone. And we do love our volunteers here at CSL Dallas, so make sure to help a friend out. If you see another person's hand raised, please pass the microphone off to them. And for those who are online, which I see we do have a hand raised. So
good, perfect.
Somebody's ahead of the button on that one.
I love it.
Yep. For all those who are joining us via Zoom, you can hit the raise your hand icon. It's located down below under the reactions tab. And from all the folks that are joining us via Facebook, make sure to put your questions and comments and where you're watching us from inside of the chat. And we would love to bring that into the room as well. So I'm going to start online first.
That'd be great.
And then we can poll the audience here to see if we have anybody.
Perfect.
So Marjorie, you want to go ahead and unmute
I'm so
yourself?
glad, Marjorie, because I think you have a leftover question from last week.
Yes, I think I do, and I think that this is the question I have for this morning is similar to what I was speaking to last week.
Great.
And it's something that's hard to articulate, so I understand that it's hard in these kinds of situations to get the point across and to get an answer or a response in such a limited, format and everything. So I understand all of that. So I basically am just kind of looking at the paragraph that we just looked at here, where Ernest Holmes says that the world is beginning to realize that it has learned all it should through suffering and pain. And this was approximately 100 years ago or whatever, however many years ago it was. And so I think that the evidence to me is that apparently the world has not yet learned all that it needs to learn through suffering and pain. And so I guess this is one of the paradoxes that I'm holding is, yes, I truly believe that it is possible to not have to have any more suffering and pain. And yet at the same time, the reality is that we seem to be steeped in it pretty good right now. So in terms of what's going on in the world. So I guess I just would ask you if you could please speak to holding the paradox.
Well, it's a great question, Marjorie, and we're all especially challenged by this because of the media. And so it is 100% purely the media that is continually throwing suffering and pain in our faces and making it look like it is inconceivably awful and it's worse than it's ever been, which other than climate change is actually not true. And so part of the problem is that we are so inundated with a propaganda in a particular way, a particular viewpoint, which has come out of our economic system and our media system, right? People want to make money. So how do they make money? The classic phrase in journalism is, if it bleeds, it leads. And people are more engaged because of our reptilian brain. We are more engaged to respond to fear. So people will click on things, they'll read things, they'll follow stories, and they'll get absolutely sucked into it because the reptilian brain responds to fear. That's its job. Threat, 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 threat. And the entire media industry has come to learn that over the last 100 years. It used to be that 50 years ago, you know, we had objective journalism, and we had a recognition that journalism, local newspapers, it was important to say what good was being done and what is not, what, you know, somebody got shot or killed or whatever it is. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that we are also inundated with an economic system that requires us to be dissatisfied and unhappy. Because if we are dissatisfied and unhappy, we can be persuaded to buy something that will make us happy, that is designed to make us happy. But there are so many other pieces of information that are unbelievably ignored. So for instance, in 2010, 2015, in the 2010-2015 area, the UN did an entire study, and a fabulous little video vignette that you can see on YouTube, and I wish I could tell you what it's called, shows the over the last, I think it is 500 years, they have broken apart, you know, various countries and various areas of the world, and we don't really use the same terms, but they used to be called the first world, second world, and the third world country. Now we talk about the first world, the developing countries, and the underdeveloped countries. And they did this massive thing about mortality, poverty, food sources, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And over a 500-year period of time, it shows that every single dot has moved up. Granted, some are moving up faster, some have gone further up than others, but there's not a dot that has been left behind. The amount of poverty in the world today is significantly lower than it was 50 years ago. And I just read this within the last 6 months, and I can no longer remember the statistics. But overarchingly, not that there aren't pockets of poverty. There are pockets of poverty right here in Dallas. And they're right in our own backyard in the US, and they are around the world. But the pockets of poverty is less and less. Globally. And this is the biggest problem that we have, is that in the US, we don't see global news. So I get a thing called Future Crunch, which is now called Fix the News. And they provide good news. Well, in the US, good news is usually a single person has decided to create a soup kitchen, and they're now feeding 150 people, which is lovely. It's lovely good news. But in the US, it's always about individuals. And it's astonishing when you see the good news that comes out of the world. The good news that comes out of the world is usually the confluence of individual people, organizations, whether they're corporations or not-for-profits, and governments and legislation, and everybody is working together to create significant movement. And so when I get this particular, I get 3 or 4 of these, because in Europe you get much better, full rounder news, right? You get the bad news, but you also get the good news. You get to see the people that are actually doing like identifiable work that is moving the needle. And so this particular one is the one that always catches me, because it has medicine, climate, women, education, and I think sort of a catch-all, which is war and poverty and things like that. And these are their categories. And there's a, list of stories. And every time, only 10% of those stories come out of the US. I mean, it's astonishing what's happening in the world. In the work that Lynn Twist does with the Pachamama Alliance 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years, something like that, they put out a beautiful film, they put out a beautiful workshop for really taking care of the earth and understanding climate change and all of the indigenous wisdom. And at the end, I really want to say maybe 15 years ago now, there is this list of every organization they could find that was working on climate, indigenous, women, education, well, you know, I mean, everybody that they could find that was doing good work in the world. And the list was 2,500 organizations. That was 15 years ago. That included, I don't know, they estimated somewhere between 5 and 10 million people, whatever the number is, 80 million, I don't know. It's a drop in the bucket compared to the number of people on the planet. But we don't hear it. We don't hear it. We don't see it. And so our job is, so let me just say, ooh, I'm a little hot. Let me just say a few other things. You can tell. This is very important. I love that you asked this question, Marjorie. It gives me a chance to talk about it. And so our job is to focus on the good, right? And to say good must come of this. It is our job, both individually and collectively, to demand that good comes of the bad things that happen. And it is our expectation that good will come of it that must actually produce the good. Do you see? That's how the law works. And the more people that are working toward that and expecting it to actually make a difference, the more that it moves the needle. So this was a conversation in 1982 and 83 when I was in ministerial school. This very conversation, these very words were spoken, Marjorie, that you have asked. The world is going to hell in a handbasket. And why do we even think science of mind is going to make a difference? Why should we become ministers? It's all just awful anyway, and it's never going to get any better. And and I remember my one of the teachers, he was the dean of the school, Glenn Wood, he brought in a little newspaper clipping. And he said, you know, is this how it feels to you, right? The newspaper clipping, I'm paraphrasing now, says, the legislature is, the Senate is powerless. The people in government are corrupt. Nothing is working. The city is falling apart. The kids are no longer paying attention to their parents. I mean, there was a whole list of things like this, and literally it ended with the world is going to hell in a handbasket. And we all raised our hand and said, yeah, where did this come from? Oh, it came out of a Roman newspaper, 60 BCE. And so our job is not to deny that there are bad things happening. Just as we don't deny that, you know, we broke our leg, or I just, you know, had a big thing in my family. My stepfather passed away, a big, huge drama with my siblings. Not to deny that those things are happening, but to decide how I am going to take it up, how I'm going to approach it, how I'm going to be with it, right? And what is my expectation? And this is the paradox. You are exactly right, Marjorie. It is the paradox. It is the exact same paradox that we confront when we look at our, let's say, small bank account, and we affirm, I live in an abundant universe and I'm experiencing abundance. Or we go to the doctor and we get a diagnosis and we affirm, I'm whole, perfect, and complete. I expect a healing. Do you see? It's no different. It's just that we get to do this collectively, and we get to do this for the whole in exactly the same way that we do it for ourselves. Now, let us be clear. It is not easy. Just as it's not easy to have a diagnosis ourselves or somebody we love and not to become frightened, not to buy into the authority of the medical establishment, not to wonder whether miracles are possible, right? And so then we have these much larger things. Truthfully, I find myself very, very, very afraid about climate change, watching the increase of extremes and the continued, albeit identifiably smaller voices that it's not really happening. And every time I have to do the work, Do I believe that we are, as human beings, that we are individualized expressions of the one? Do I believe in the wisdom and intelligence of the universe moving through me and everybody and other people who are all working for the good? Do I believe that we can, in fact, respond when we decide that we are going to learn what is available to us to learn? And I choose to answer the question yes. And I have lots of evidence that this is the case, that we as human beings are creative, and that we do know how to respond to these kinds of things. That's my choice. My choice is to move through the world that way. And it is a paradox. There's no question about it. And we have to work with it every day, whether it's the issues with what's happening for women today and all the anti-abortion issues with the marginalized people of color. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. But that list has still has been here for a long time. And surprisingly enough, in many, many ways and places, we are in fact moving forward. We just we don't see it unless we ferret it out. So this is the paradox. Can we see the pain while standing witness to how we choose to see it become? It's precisely what we do in our own lives, and that's what we're called to. So I'll just say that I just had a lovely conversation with a friend of mine. She's also a member of the community, and she was sharing with me, she went to the Conscious Capitalist convention that was held here in Dallas, and she shared that out of all the speakers were talking about it, what we've been doing is blaming every group's shadow. You're not doing it right, you're not doing it right, isn't it awful, isn't it awful, isn't it awful, right? And what we actually need to do is focus on birthing where the light is, birthing what's coming new, birthing what the new humanity way in which we're going to be. And that's our job as light bringers, right? If we're going to be conscious people, whether it's in our families, our workplaces, our homes, our places of worship, that's what we're called to. We're called to the light. We're called to the light, and we have to be unwaveringly about this unfolding toward good and demand that good comes of it, rather than pointing out, ain't it awful, ain't it awful, ain't it awful, ain't it awful, over and over and over and over again. Ain't it awful? What's there? What's the future? What does it look like? How do we stand for it? How do we see it, believe in it, all of those kinds of things. So it's a great question. And I think that it's part of exactly, right? The suffering is when we feel trapped, stuck. It's never going to be any different. And we resign ourselves to it, accept it, or fall into just a debilitating fear around it. Right? It's always going to be this way. It's never going to, and it's actually getting worse rather than better. All of those ways are ways in which we continue to suffer. And what we want to do is say, yes, it's real. It's real. These things are really happening. And where do we go from here? So thanks for your question, Marjorie. Ryan.
Yeah, I just wanted to read this beautiful quote by Viktor Frankl that came into the chat, and it falls really parallel with what you're saying. It says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom.
Yes. And that's always what the science of mind is pointing to, is that gap, that moment of choosing. And it's not, the most important thing is to recognize it is not denial about the human condition. That's just hateful. That's just cruel. That's cruel to other people who are experiencing it. It's cruel to ourselves when we're experiencing it, right? We have to feel our feelings. We have to feel our feelings. And sometimes those feelings are big, and we have to find safe places and healthy ways to feel it and express it. and then channel those feelings into the actual response we want to give, have, do, that we think will actually make a good difference, as opposed to just responding out of the, unthinkingly out of the stimulus. Right? And that's the discipline. That's the discipline that we're trying to learn here by exploring the science of mind and learning that discipline, that gap. Deepak Chopra calls it the gap. Exactly what this beautiful quote talks about. It's that gap, and it's right in that moment where we have the opportunity. Am I going to be a benevolent presence? Am I going to speak for what I want instead of against what I think is awful? Am I going to tell another story about how bad it is? Or am I going to look for some evidence that there are people, in fact, moving the needle forward? Like, do you know that Texas, 38% of Texas's electricity comes from wind and solar? Did you know that?
Really?
Yes.
38%?
38%. It's unfreaking believable. Why do we not know this? Why is this not splashed across and people? Well, I have my opinions about why that is, really. You get to have your own opinions about that, right? It's just, I mean, it's just mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling. So we have to be responsible also in what we take in and where we take it in from, right? This does not mean don't be informed. No, no, no. That's not what it means. It does mean you need to be informed. But are you in the rabbit hole and you're always only going down the same rabbit hole, listening to the same people, having the same opinions over and over and over again, and then we're shocked that somebody else is in a different opinion? Well, we've been in our own little echo chamber, right? And so we have to be responsible for what we allow in and how we allow it in, and whether or not we're taking responsibility for the kinds of information that we're actually taking in. So I get 3 or 4 or 5 newsletters that I've specifically sought out. I have one newsletter that gives, there's things that are happening politically, and the person writes and they say, this is what the right is saying, this is what the left is saying. And then here's a way of thinking about it, right? And if we're only in one side or the other, we only have a particular way of seeing it, right? We only want to hear those things that corroborate with how we think about it.
Help me find it.
It's called Tangle. Tangle, and and I don't always agree with what the guy says at the end and how he kind of like wraps up, like he has his take, but I'll tell you, I agree with it a fair amount, because he feels sensible to me, instead of this, this and this, and so I have a number of these things that I look at. I got a newsletter from an epidemiologist who was really dealing with, what was happening with COVID. Let's cut through the BS. I'm an epidemiologist. She started out with 250 people on her newsletter. She now has 1 million. She's been invited to the White House to talk about, what was going on, and now she's dealing with other. She even has done epidemiology around gun violence and children in schools, and but I've had to ferret these out, and then some of them I ferreted out, and I'm like, well, you say that that's what you're doing, but there's a little too much. You can always tell when there's energetic words, when there's words that are designed to poke you or to capture you. Oh, you're right, those people. You always have to watch that. And anytime that there's that kind of language in, I unsubscribe. I'm not interested. I'm not interested in being manipulated, and I don't want you to try to pull me into a particular way of thinking about it. Because that's what frees us. Right? That's why science of mind is a liberation theology. We are freed by becoming less autopilot. And that takes discipline, and it takes paying attention, and it takes realizing, wow, I just got really sucked in. Is that how I want to be? Is that what I want to think? Is that how I want to behave? All of those kinds of things. And again, it takes discipline. Right? And being able to separate out, that is an idea that I abhor, is different than you're a villain for having that idea. right? Because if we're all one, and everyone is an individualized expression of the divine, sometimes hard to swallow, but spirit is there too. And everybody is, in fact, expressing to the best of their ability. And I get to abhor an idea, and I get to abhor a behavior. But being able to see that that human being is a human being, a spiritual being having their human experience, keeps me from vilifying them, right? And then we don't have to get into the constant swirl of they're awful, those people, them, they, right? But we can say this behavior is not acceptable. And this idea, no, this doesn't align. This doesn't align with our spirituality or how I think about things. Right? And all of that's the discipline that comes with meditation, self-awareness, paying attention to what's going on up here, seeing what we get caught on, and then it's that gap. Do I want to now respond out of this thought, feeling, behavior, or do I want to choose how I'm going to respond? Which also makes our no much more powerful, because our no, this is unacceptable, is actually able to be heard because it doesn't come with a personal attack, right? Doesn't mean we can't say no, absolutely. Doesn't mean we can't say that's evil. But it comes without the personal attack, which is the only way we're ever going to be able to have our no be heard, right? We have to be able to be convicted, strong, powerful, passionate, but we don't do that. We don't vilify others, because that also is counter to the recognition that we're all connected and we're all part of the whole. And for me, that means that I can look at myself in the mirror. Was I benevolent presence? Did I do to the best of my ability? Did I speak clearly, without making the other person, without it being about their personhood? And then I think, yeah, because I can love some personhood and still say, no, you don't get to do that. You don't get to do that around me. You don't get to speak that way about people around me. You don't get, that's not the way that we behave. However we want to say that. All right, I don't know, do we have time for another comment? I've just talked because Marjorie got me worked up. Thank you for your question, Marjorie. And these are all things, right? I've spent years working with all of this, right? And you will too. This is the process of then practicing. It's not just the idea, oh, this is a good idea, I like it, or I don't like it, right? These are the things that we practice over time, so that stopping in that gap becomes a habit rather than the habit of responding from autopilot. Brian.
Well, I do know that we're wrapping up, but I do want to throw this out here because it does really resonate with all the stuff that we're talking about here in the Science of Mind class. On the 14th, which is coming up this next week on Tuesday, Dr. Petra and our very own practitioner, Sharon McGregor, are going to be hosting a sacred healing experience. And it's going to be incorporating some of the Native American traditions. And so I invite you all to come and participate. It is in person only, but it will be something that's going to be very special. If you're looking to heal your life, heal your mind, then you want to be here on the 14th.
Yeah, it's going to be beautiful. Sharon is a pipe carrier, and so it's a pipe ceremony and specifically for healing. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And then the last note is we have a very special one-day meditation retreat that's going to be coming up May 25th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. You're going to want to definitely clear your day out for this, because it's going to be a great immersive experience. You learn different styles of meditation with our very own Dr. Petra, and it's going to give yourself a chance to really go inward and deeper than you ever have before. So I highly encourage you guys to check that out. That is in person only, once again. I know we'll have some more stuff for the online folks coming up here shortly, but I just wanted to make mention of those because those are two really great events.
Yes, thanks, Ryan. And the 25th, right? If you just need to de-stress, you need a little spa for your soul. Join. You know, it's really meant to be a time of quiet and practice together.
I like the sound of that. A spa for your soul.
Yes. We're calling it an inner oasis.
Ah, that's
right?
why we called it inner
That's
oasis.
right.
Now it's starting to click. Okay.
Right. So it's less about learning meditation. It's really less about learning meditation. It's just simply about being guided in various forms of meditation so that we can have that experience of de-stressing, of the nurturing that we get by being in the silence, by being in a group meditation experience, and to just be able to go, for a day. I don't know about you, but I need it on a regular basis. So yeah, join us for the Inner Oasis meditation retreat. It'll be really wonderful. So happy Mother's Day for anybody who joined us later. Again, it's for everybody who's ever been a mom position. It doesn't matter whether you're male or female. It doesn't matter whether you're the mom or the aunt or the adopted mom or the friend down the street. My son, he had a neighbor mom, and it was great. And of course, her son, I was the neighbor mom, so it worked out really well. You know, all those ways in which we support our children. So happy Mother's Day. Have a beautiful day, and we'll see you again soon. Bye for now.
All right.
Got to be careful about the questions. You never know. It's going to make me hot. I have nothing to say about this.